The roots of the current financial crisis extend before President Bush took office, and his warnings went unheeded. In April 2001, just 3 months in office, he warned that financial trouble at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac could have strong repercussions in financial markets. In May 2002, he called for disclosure and corporate governance principles to be applied to those agencies. In February 2003, the Bush administration warned that unexpected problems at Fannie and Freddie could immediately spread beyond the housing market. 7 months, that was in 2003, by the way. 7 months later, the Treasury Secretary called for prudent minimum capital adequacy requirements for Fannie and Freddie. In February 2004, President Bush called for stronger regulation of Fannie and Freddie because of their low levels of required capital, that is, subprime mortgages. Warnings continued month after month, year after year. The notion that the Bush administration sat by while the problem developed, or worse yet, fought increased regulation is simply a bald-faced lie. President Bush campaigned on education reform, having the courage to speak of what he called the bigotry of low expectations. He delivered education reform with the No Child Left Behind Act, and I can tell you what a difference it has made. One example is D Elementary School in Ogden, Utah. Nearly every student in that school is economically disadvantaged. More than 80% are minorities, more than 44% are learning the English language, and 10% are homeless. Those are challenging demographics no matter where they're found. At the beginning of the 2003-2004 school year, only 13% of D Elementary third graders were reading at grade level. In just 5 years, after D Elementary was chosen to participate in the Reading First program, that figure quadrupled to 52%. The school jumped from only the 9th percentile in 5th grade reading to the 43rd percentile. And I'm so proud to say that D Elementary has now met adequate yearly progress standards for 3 consecutive years. Lives are changed, hopes are kindled, and futures are brighter as a result. Empowering teachers to help students meet higher expectations works, and that has become federal educational policy under President Bush. The educational achievement gap between white and minority students narrowed, and both 4th and 8th graders achieved their highest reading and math scores on record. I am hopeful that the new President and Secretary of Education will recognize and build on the reform-oriented approach of the Bush administration through supporting policies such as charter schools and school choice. He seems like a very competent man, and I support him. President Bush campaigned on Medicare reform, and he delivered with the Medicare Modernization Act, the most significant reform of the Medicare program since it was created in 1965. That couldn't have happened without the leadership of George W. Bush. As a result of this law, 40 million Americans have better access to prescriptions and other choices in their health care coverage. It also provided for health savings accounts, which President Bush insisted not be limited solely to Medicare beneficiaries. These accounts are portable and give people more choices and more ways to improve their lives. I served on the House Senate Conference Committee on this legislation for months and months, hours every day, and attribute its success to President Bush's leadership. President Bush has challenged all Americans and his own party to change the way we address real human needs in this country. This includes increasing the impact of nonprofit organizations, ending discriminations against faith-based groups that can provide services, and promoting volunteerism. We filed the Kennedy-Hatch bill on volunteerism, which we hope will be passed in the stimulus package. That really comes in large measure from a number of presidents, but including President Bush. As a result, chronic homelessness has dropped by nearly 30% in just the last few years because of faith-based groups, services, and volunteerism. President Bush also advanced a culture of life. Our Declaration of Independence recognizes that we are endowed by our Creator with an inalienable right to life. That is a foundational principle. In an interview a year ago, President Bush said that his belief that every human life has dignity has informed his policies and programs. I do not understand where the compassion and commitment come from for hundreds of programs and billions of dollars to help millions of people without believing that those people's very lives were worth protecting. The conviction that life itself is sacred is the best foundation for liberty and prosperity, for human and civil rights. President Bush shares that conviction and signed into law the ban on the horrific practice of partial birth abortion, which the Supreme Court has now upheld. He also signed the Born Alive Infant Protection Act and the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. President Bush also appointed judges who know their proper place in our system of government. Our liberty depends on limited government, and that means government limited by a written Constitution that actually means something. The Constitution cannot limit government if government defines the Constitution. President Bush appointed judges who know that this principle applies to them. This is one of the most important and most long-lasting results of President Bush's leadership. Others believe the judges not only apply the law, but they make the law they apply. Others believe that judges should decide cases based on where their personal empathy lies, based on the political interests that can be served. Others believe that judges should take sides in a case before those sides even appear in court. That activist, politicized view of judging will destroy our liberty, and I'm glad that President Bush sided with America's founders and appointed judges who will interpret and apply the law and leave politics to the people. President Bush charted a new course for energy security. This is another area which the recent financial crisis can easily obscure. But President Bush's first order of business was producing a major energy plan and task force. That plan became the Energy Policy Act of 2005. I know. I was on the conference committee. It included a proposal I authored called the CLEAR Act, which provided incentives for hybrid and alternative fuel vehicles and spurred the alternative fuel vehicles in this country system. President Bush's advocacy of plug-in hybrid vehicle technology resulted in passage of the Freedom Act, which I drafted along with Senators Barack Obama and Maria Cantwell, two good people who fought for that bill, as did I. And President Bush called for developing our nation's unconventional fuel resources, including oil shale and tar sands. Only the most willful denial or ideological distortion will buy the spin from environmental extremists that President Bush has done nothing to protect the environment or to move us away from our dependence on oil. He's done a lot. And he has done it before a lot of other big mouths around here. At the same time, knowing that our current transportation needs depend on oil, President Bush has led the way to doubling domestic oil and gas production on public lands. I could go on and on about issue after issue, listing one accomplishment after another. But my remarks today are intended to be more than just a factual recitation. Many others are writing and analyzing the Bush presidency and record from many different perspectives. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, that an editorial entitled Bush's Achievements from the January 19th issue of the Weekly Standard be made part of the record following my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, before I close, I have to say a word about our wonderful and gracious First Lady, Laura Bush. Her strength, dignity, and grace will leave a lasting mark on the role of First Lady. She was has been a kind, steady presence, advocating for causes in her own right as the President led the nation